Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 1 Episode 17. It is called Dramatis Personae. Although I think when I looked at the list of... Oh no, it does. I think I just misread it earlier, but I was looking at the list of all the Star Trek episodes. I'm pretty sure I just read it as Dramatic Personas, which is basically what it means, but still.
It's the essential translation, yeah.
This episode features the crew getting sick with a mind virus of sorts, and they start plotting against each other. They kind of devolve into two factions, but Odo is unaffected and is kind of left to try and piece everything back together and figure out what's happening. So that is the basic gist of it. What did you make of this one?
I liked it, but didn't love it. I think its individual parts are probably better than it as a complete entire package. There are definitely like a lot of things I like about it, but I don't think I necessarily really love it as an episode.
Yeah, I think was more excited for it beforehand, and I think it was still good. I still enjoyed Odo dealing with everything. I don't know if it quite was into the factions that I thought it was going to be. It was kind of just O'Brien with Cisco, and then Kira was trying to recruit others, but failing.
I think every time it showed them being like really paranoid and just going off on one, having a little monologue about like what they need to do, those moments were great. I just don't think the things around it quite lived up to that.
Yeah, I enjoyed sort of when like Odo starts to like hear more direct like things from like Kira about going up against Cisco and trying to, oh, maybe you should go and sneak into this ship and check things out for me, even though, and it's like, yeah, Cisco ordered this, then I'll double check with him. No, you don't have to do that. He's too busy. Just go on, liquid your way in there and get some juicy details.
It'll be fine.
Like that was, I think. Obviously, we weren't sure going into this if it was the whole crew or just the main characters. It turns out it's just the main characters because it's only the people, well, more or less. There's a couple of red shirts, but it's the people who were in the command room when this Klingon beamed aboard at the start of the episode. So it means like someone like Quark isn't affected either. And I enjoyed his kind of like being caught up in it for a couple of scenes as well. He gets his neck wrung by Kira for being paranoid and thinking that he's paying attention and listening to her, which leads to Quark in a neck brace, which is, and again, this is another little moment where they use the fact that Quark and Odo know each other as well as they do, for Odo to basically discern that, oh no, Quark's not affected by this because he's still just being Quark. Yeah, obviously he's not happy with Quark. He's never happy with Quark, but
he's being his usual scumbaggy self. But that's the point.
Yeah, so he knows that he's not affected by this, and he can take his words at face value
as much as he ever can.
Yeah. Oh, they also have an interaction in this episode though when he's questioning him, where Quark does this great slow turn when he realizes Odo is like fishing for information, and he turns around really slowly and then like tries to extort him for it, and then Odo basically just says, yeah, you know how you were complaining that the Klingons messed up your holosuite and you're waiting for that repair crew to come in? I think I'll keep them busy with other jobs for the foreseeable future. So he got the player got played, I suppose, you could say. But I did enjoy him trying, as always.
I always enjoy seeing those two playing off each other. I think it's easy to forget how they've known each other the longest out of like anyone on the show. In terms of individual one-to-one relationships, theirs goes back a lot further than most of the others. And I do think that comes across, especially as we're still relatively early days in the show.
Yeah, I think what was interesting to me this episode is that I realised that we've not seen Jake in a few, and I feel like he was quite heavily prominent.
He had like 2 or 3 in a row.
Yeah.
Where he was there. School holidays.
Clearly. And I think it stuck out to me here because we actually went to Cisco's like quarters at one point, and I thought, where's Jake in all this? Is Jake not thinking his dad's acting weird? So maybe he's just stopped his... Although, I suppose they do technically explain it, because they say at the start of the episode that
They're on a field trip.
Yeah, they never mention him by name though. They mention that O'Brien's wife has taken her class, and I think at the time I wasn't thinking Jake, but now that I'm thinking about it, we've only ever seen her have one class. So yeah, so he's probably down the planet.
The way he described it, it sounded like younger kids.
It did. It sounded like a bunch of 7-year-olds or something like that.
Yeah, but in hindsight, kind of has to be them.
Yeah. I mean, it would make sense for her to have like 2 age groups, but I think she doesn't. I think it's just like one hodgepodge group of kids because that's all there is in the station.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough kids to have more than that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the basic gist of it is once it gets going is that we're introduced at the start of the episode to this Valerian ship is docked at the station, and Kira's upset about it because they used to sell weapons and things like that to the Cardassians. She wants a reason to like bust them and search the ship, and Sisko's like, look, we have no actual evidence to suggest they're doing anything wrong right now. We have to be diplomatic about this. And Kira agrees with that. She's not thrilled about it, but she understands, what the deal is. But this ends up being an important kind of like little thing for when they actually start getting paranoid. It kind of all starts to revolve around that to begin with, where she's starting to make moves to do it behind his back. Sisko's getting angry. Probably my favorite of like the early build up of like they're acting out a character, because I think the very first thing you get is actually Dax just laughing and giggling at the computer screen. Dax is kind of like a rogue.
Is that before or after Bashir's stuff?
That's before, I think. I'm pretty sure that's before. Yeah, because it's right at the end of the scene where everything's just happened, and Sisko said, "Go and take a shuttle and check out see if you can find the flight recorder."
Yeah.
And she just starts giggling at the screen. And I did feel like Dax throughout the episode was kind of this weird like wild card, and I'm wondering if that's because of her unique, she's not just a person, right? She's a trill. So I'm wondering if that is like having a weird effect in her, where it's sort of just kind of giving her the giggles because she never really picks a side. Anytime someone tries to recruit her to a side, she's kind of waffly about it.
And that's in a way, it's kind of part of my problem with the episode is that it doesn't really define like the actual issue of the threat that well. It like makes some of them like pick factions and paranoid, but it makes like Bashir's just like really like, oh, I wonder who's doing what. He gets interested, but again, there's no like side taking.
Yeah, he just he's like gossiping because he's like, oh, there's a war coming, there's a civil war coming on this station. You got to pick a side, Odo. Honestly, my favorite of the whole thing is probably O'Brien, because he's got more of a definitive thing where he's in the shuttle with Dax and he immediately just starts saying, that Kira's up to no good again, filthy Bajoran. You're becoming quite friendly with her, haven't you, Dax? He was getting all accusatory. And then he's like, anyone who's against Sisko's against me. And he's, so he at least is like very clear that he's like siding with Sisko.
And by the end, he's there going to Sisko like, we need to flee. We need to run, and we're going to come back with a fleet, and we're going to take this place by force. We're going to take out all your enemies. And I kind of loved that scene.
Yeah, whereas Sisko kind of becomes more of a recluse, where he's just kind of hiding and like building this like mechanical clock device the entire episode.
Yeah.
Which, that was like really weird and specific, and I the implication I got is they were talking about, okay, whatever happened on this Klingon ship, which resulted in its destruction, was this kind of like 2 factions arose, they fought, that's why the ship explodes, and then this surviving Klingon, who didn't really survive, but he survived long enough to beam over just before he died, he spread this, they kept calling it the Matrix, that spread to them, and so it's replayed, and it's replaying this old conflict, and I thought because they were being so specific with Sisko having this like mechanical thing that he's building throughout the episode, and he's like sort of just hiding and letting O'Brien do all the actual like paranoia stuff, it was making me think, oh, is it going to turn out that they're actually replaying a very specific story? It made me think of the episode of the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, of all things. But there's an episode,
it's been so long.
There's an episode in season 2 of Buffy where basically different people in the school keep getting possessed and playing out this like sort of romance that went wrong in the 50s. And it keeps resulting in someone dying because it ended in like this murder suicide. And
it's definitely an episode of Smallville that does that as well.
Well, Smallville stole a lot for Buffy, to be fair.
It really did, yeah.
So it was making me think of that it might go down that path where Cisco's filling a specific role of someone in this original conflict that it's replaying out through these characters, and they're all kind of filling roles in with that. But it never went into what that original conflict was beyond just there was a conflict.
No, I think it's supposed to be just general revolutionary stuff. Like Kira's the lead revolutionary. Cisco's the monarch, right? He's the king, hiding away. O'Brien's the chief general. Like they fill the roles in a lot of typical historical stories, but nothing specific that it ends up actually being, I don't think.
Yeah, Odo, obviously he ends up being the central character because he's the one who's not affected. He actually has a kind of a neat moment where clearly it tries to affect him, and his body kind of rejects it after he's speaking to Quark. And this is actually a nice little moment because Quark, when he sees Odo, his face kind of goes all weird and watery for a second.
He goes blank.
Yeah, and then he collapses, and Quark actually goes running, like screaming for Dr. Bashir. So that's actually kind of oddly sweet that Quark was actually genuinely concerned for Odo's well-being for a moment. So that's nice. But from that point on, Odo, of course, is like just starting to notice how out of character everyone is. He's starting to think this is really strange, and it's not like he's just thinking one person's wrong, because as soon as he tries to talk to like someone else after he's like realized one side's acting weird, he starts to notice that both sides are acting really strange and conspiring against each other and all sorts of things. I think my favorite part of it though is probably when he needs to like get this stuff analyzed and figure a sort of a cure for it effectively. He basically has to sort of trick Bashir into kind of like phrasing it and like convincing him that this is good to like win the fight. And this is maybe one of the things you were talking about, is that it never really feels that Bashir picks a side. I actually disagree only slightly, in that by the time we get to this later scene where he's with Odo and Odo's convincing him to get involved, it's clear that he has picked a side. I just don't think we ever know which side he picked.
Yeah, the way he talks to like some of the patients, definitely, I agree, does imply he's picked a side.
Yeah.
It's less that he doesn't pick a side, more he doesn't get involved.
Yeah. Because he says to Odo, you have to pick a side, or eventually you'll be left behind. You'll be an enemy of everyone, so you're going to have to pick.
Or has he picked? Is he doing the "I'm playing both sides"?
Oh, yeah, maybe. But much like some of these other things we've talked about, it didn't really go into that enough to make it feel like it was actually doing that.
It's quite frustrating that I really like a lot of the things it's doing. It just doesn't do enough.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, yeah, just some conceptual choices about how they handled the characters. Because part of me's thinking, would it have been better off as a two-parter, maybe, or something?
I was just thinking that as well.
Yeah, but I do think there's probably a good one-episode version of this, but just sort of reorganizing it a little bit and just maybe giving some more focus to certain characters and maybe simplifying some of the allegiances a little bit so that it does quickly become more of a 3 versus 3, so there's two clear camps, as opposed to this weird Dax and Bashir are kind of wavering.
I think that's like what we've got here is more realistic, right, in terms of the historical influences it's drawing from. It's more realistic that it would and was like that. I don't think it works in a 45-minute episode, though. I think it's too much. You need to condense it further.
Yeah. So, yeah, a bit of a, not a huge miss, but it is a bit of a miss in terms of, I think, what we were expecting from the episode. It's certainly the potential that's in there throughout a lot of these moments and ideas that are at play. Yeah,
it just needs a bit more focus, as well as, let's say, maybe consolidating the groups a little bit quicker and a little bit firmer. It needed some more, a little bit endgame stuff, because obviously we're like, oh yeah, Kira's wants control. Why? What's her aim? I guess I get that the idea is, well, it's kind of, there's not supposed to be a point. It's kind of this infection, but I feel like she still needs to have more of a motivation and a goal to achieve, as opposed to it kind of feeling this ethereal, just well, I'll take control, and Cisco to O'Brien kind of being like, well, we'll run away and we'll come back later.
Well, I think for me, what you're getting at there is that at a certain point, O'Brien just turns and says, I think Kira's going to make an attempt on your life. And then sure enough, that seems to be what she's doing. I think it needed a turning point in the story where Kira was motivated to do that. And I realize that, you know, a lot of what's happening here is them being influenced. But I think that the escalation, there has to, even if it's not something that feels, you know, like, it wouldn't be justifiable in any other context, but in this context, like, Cisco does something where Kira unifiably says, no, he has to be taken out because he's this now, or because he's refusing to budge on this. I never feel like it had that moment.
That's it. It feels like it is irrational, and they're supposed to be acting irrationally. But even when it's irrational in the story, there still needs to be rational explanations for their own motivations to themselves.
It doesn't have to be,
feel like that's there.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be justifiable in a larger sense, just to them and their delusions in the moment.
Yeah, and I'm not sure it even tries to do that.
Yeah, it just kind of shifts to, oh no, it's assassination attempts.
Yeah.
Which, although I think for the first time we see Cisco just punch the shit out of someone.
Yeah, he's usually pretty calm and reserved.
Yeah,
he at his worst, he maybe shouts a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's Bajoran who tries to poison him. He lays into him quite.
He deserves it for trying to poison him, to be fair.
Quite efficiently. What was funny is at the end of the episode is basically Kira coming to Cisco and saying, "Look, technically, obviously, none of us are really responsible for anything we've done the last day, but I still feel like I should probably make some sort of an apology for trying to, like, you know, mutiny." And Cisco's like, we'll let it slide this one time.
This time. Yeah.
Which, you know, I was like, okay. Yeah. So I was expecting more from the episode.
Like there's again, it gets to the end here, and there's an implication that maybe these feelings are there somewhere. Like that this didn't come out of nowhere. But I don't feel like the show's really established that was an undercurrent, at least not since the first 2 or 3 episodes.
No, I think if they'd sort of like had a more somber scene at the end where they admitted that, like, what this say in theory, and I've seen other shows do this as well, when they all get, you know, influenced by magic or something, where they all act out a character, but they sort of sometimes at the end acknowledge these are all taking like seeds of something that we do actually feel, but turning it up to an obscene number. Maybe they could have done something like that here, where, okay, this feeling that you want to rebel and take control's kind of natural, and this, you know, influence sort of like took it to its extreme. So we have to maybe, you know, address the fact that we feel on some level that this is there. And
see, now that you mention it, the more I think about it, the more frustrated I am we didn't get anything with Kira, because she is a rebel, right? That's her role in this. She's the rebel. She's the one standing up against Cisco, being like, oh, let's take back what's ours. And that's what she was against the Cardassians. That is her character. Like, she is the rebel, but it doesn't play into her history in any way here. It doesn't feel like it's drawing on her own experiences.
No, I mean, I had that episode, of course, with the old man on the moon that she was trying to help, and that kind of made these big points by the end of it for her character.
And it was a lot better episode than this.
I think it's a better episode than this as well, and I do also think maybe they could have done something where they maybe not reference that, but sort of like felt like the relationship between her and Cisco, which was kind of like furthered in that episode with him giving her advice and talking to her about being this officer that he needs and that he wants to keep her around. Maybe, you know, this could have felt the next step in that relationship, and I don't really feel like it does. I feel like at the end, the way they just kind of shrug it off makes this feel like it was fluff and not like it's really important to the grand scheme of anything. You know, so that's a bit of a shame. So yeah. So great concept of an episode, but ultimately
a lot of really enjoyable individual scenes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a lot of great Odo scenes.
Great performances all around.
Quark's good. O'Brien's great in here. Kira as well even gets to, like, you know, there's a scene where Odo comes back, and it's when she's trying to convince Odo to, like, do stuff for her. When he comes back into the security room, she's just sort of like leaning back in his chair, and she's sort of stretching, and she's acting not totally different, but just a little bit more of a sort of playful flirtation to her than she normally has. And so they're getting to all do a little bit different, which is part of the fun, I think, for the actors with these types of episodes, is to get to do something different from their normal character, which, you know, is fun. So you've got all those elements, so it's not a bad watch by any means. It's still a very easy episode to get through, but certainly.
Yeah, I still think it's pretty good episode. It's just not. It's not great like it should have been, and it has the potential to have been.
Yeah. So there you go. Next time we are back with Deep Space Nine because I had 2 in a row on the original air date order. And it is the episode called Duet. And here's the description on IMDb. A Cardassian suffering from the Kalanora, a disease that indicates he's served in a labor camp, visits Deep Space Nine. Kira is determined to convict him as a war criminal. Okay, that sounds like it's going to be really delving into Kira's past and her feelings on Cardassians.
It is, and I assume there's going to be a level of, well, he served in a labor camp. He probably wasn't willing. Maybe we shouldn't, just punish him and not punish the entire species. I assume that will be the point that's raised against her.
It sounds like it might be kind of a trial episode, even.
Oh, yeah, it could be.
Yeah, at least in spirit, if not in literal trial. So, it could be interesting. But that is next time, so we'll see you for that. Let us know what you thought of this episode in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters, mail_fuzz for channel updates. And of course, you can support all the content over at patreon.com/mailfuzztv and help support all the content and keep it coming. But that is us, so keep watching Star Trek, guys. And could Odo have split into 2 puddles and had a puddle civil war? I guess it's an inner conflict at that point if it's both Odo